I assume from looking out at all of you that there are actually people sitting there and they're not just cardboard cutouts. It's a little hard to tell from up here with the lights, but we'll soldier on and see if we can manage to make this an interesting evening for you. So good evening. I'm Ray Williamson. I'm the co-chair of the Policy and Law Department, along with Timiyebi Agnyaba, and our TA is Ana Cristina, whom I'm sure you all know, certainly at this point. And I've been asked to moderate this session. We have several quite distinguished commentators here that, and the whole issue that we'll be dealing with is where space is today, where it's going, where it could be going, what are the challenges, what are the challenges, not just the challenges, but the opportunities that we face, and so forth. So let me introduce our speakers. I'll do that one by one right now, and then I'll say a few more words, and we'll proceed with some questions and so forth. And we look forward to your questions from the audience in a few minutes. But first, we'll hear a few things from our experts that we've invited to take part. Now, the first one is your lecturer for the last couple of days, Philippe Clerc from France. He's, to remind you all, he's currently the head of legal affairs, and he's the deputy director at CNES, the French Space Agency. He's an ISUer with his master's degree, MSS, and in the first MSS class graduated in 1996. I think that's where we first met, actually, Philippe. And the second person here is Augusto Gonzalez from the European Commission. He is the advisor of the EU Satellite Navigation Program, and he was earlier the director for the EU Space Policy Program. And that's where I first met Augusto several years ago. And then finally, we have with us by magic means on Skype, we have Camilo Guzman from the Universidad Sergio Arboleda in Bogota, Colombia. And he is the director of the CREAR Research Group in Public Law and Policy and Public Law Department and professor at Sergio Arboleda Universidad in Bogota. So what I'll do is say a few words and then start off with a couple of questions to our respondents, and then we'll proceed from there. So I just wanted to, I'm reading a little bit that I wrote earlier so that I wouldn't forget it all. But we're in a rather special place today in outer space activities. We've done a lot over the last 50 years, roughly, in outer space, and we've developed space activities of all kinds, whether exploration or activities devoted to benefits directed to Earth, and so we're living in a really, in many respects. We have vibrant, expanding commercial space activities. New space is revolutionizing the space business model. We also have some competition here. Our scientific investigations of the moon, Mars, asteroids, other celestial bodies give us extraordinary new insights in the science of outer space. But we also have significant challenges. We face increasing congestion in outer space in key orbits like the geosynchronous orbits, and also in the polar orbits, sun-synchronous polar orbits. We also face congestion of debris in low Earth orbit. And as if that wasn't enough, we also have become aware, largely through the asteroid that exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia, in February 2013, of the threat of asteroids striking the Earth. And that's not to mention the space weather and other issues that we face. And then finally, we face significant challenges from climate change and from widespread environmental damage and due to displacement of human population around the globe. And space systems, I think, should be used to help in meeting these challenges. And so questions arise from just these few points that I made. For instance, and I'll start with Philippe, and then we'll go to Augusto and then to Camilo. What, in your view, are the largest opportunities we have in space activities today? Name a few and discuss them if you would.
To the angle of CNES, CNES, you know, is for France, is an average space power, an old, ancient space power. We start our activities in the 60s under the presidency of General de Gaulle, and so France has a great ambition on space activities since the beginning. Yeah, but this ambition is not only national through national way, but it has always been in the framework, in the European framework. To start with the ESA framework, we were involved since '62 in the creation of ELDO, the first ESA in launcher, or ISRO, the first ESA in the satellites. And so there is a fair sharing between our national policy for R&D, defense, or developing new technology, and small scientific instruments, and big missions like exploration. And for big missions, we don't go. We are not. There is no national policy. It's always through ESA programs. For example, our participation to the ESS is through ESA. The major program like Rosetta, Philae, you have heard about it, is through ESA. We are involved, and ESA is European, but also internationally. We have a cooperation with India in a camera for its program to the moon. So we are involved in exploration, but through in a cooperative framework. So for space is also a tool for foreign policy, for peaceful use, and for I would say it's our diplomatic relationship. So it's not only for the purpose of space, but it's foreign policy. So in few words, what are the main programs that are pushed by CNES? We are involved in JUICE. It's Jupiter, to study the moon of Jupiter. Of course, we are. Sorry, yeah. We are interested in by the New Space Initiative, and we try to find way to cooperate to help this industry. Most of the projects are initiated in the U.S., so but we are not really involved. But in the French and European industry, Airbus, Thales, they try to. They have projects on linked with exploration. There is also a project to create new spaceport abroad. So there is many projects, but we try to share. There is no French vision on this project. It's to share with our partners, ESA, the European Union, or the space powers.
Are there opportunities for bringing French citizens into this, into knowledge, increased knowledge and so forth of space science and so forth?
Yeah, our space, our science program is very ambitious, but it is mainly through ESA. And for the general public, you have heard, the French people have been very happy with Thomas Pesquet. Recently, we was traveling in the International Space Station. It has been very popular, and we have many students, schools now try to contact MES to have a training period because of this Thomas Pesquet experience and mediation.
Augusto, the European Union is a program, has a space program that a lot of people outside of the EU are not really familiar with. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and then what are some of the opportunities you see coming in the near future?
Thank you, Ray. I hope that with my presence here I can contribute to dispelling some of the fog that may be around European space programs. I would perhaps start by saying that I would add to the list that you have outlined in your introduction that what characterizes today's way of living is the pervasive presence of space in our lives. I have space right here in my pocket, and I guarantee you that you also have space in your pocket right now, because everyone carrying around a smartphone, and maybe this connection with our friend in Colombia is being made possible because there is space infrastructure providing telecommunication, the space infrastructure providing imagery, data for weather, for location-based services and what have you, because all smartphones today have a satellite navigation receiver in it that works with GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, some of them. So this is the reality in which we find ourselves today. The European Union is not a space agency. The European Union is there for the well-being of citizens, and the well-being of citizens, the European citizens in Europe, obviously is only possible insofar as the economy works, among other things, insofar as we're able to create employment, insofar as we're able to generate growth, and insofar as we're able also to guarantee peace and respond to certain societal challenges that some of you mentioned. For example, climate change. So the opportunity that space represents for the Union is one that helps us respond to some of those challenges, help us create economic growth, create jobs. We are investing billions in one program, space observation program, Earth observation program, Copernicus. We're spending billions in another big program named Galileo, satellite navigation. And we don't do it because we like space. We do like space, allow me to say. It's essential. And people that work and live with the passion of space make it possible. But as an organization, we do it because it is an instrument for us to contribute ultimately to the well-being of Europe's people. And the money that we're spending in space are a lifeline for the space industry that employ engineers like some of you in this forum today. They are the ones that build infrastructure. That creates activity. That provides an incentive for students to find a career path, for supplying industry also to provide everything that is necessary in everything in space endeavors, in space projects, and building satellites and so forth. We put infrastructure in space and then we generate data. There are signals, positioning signals available, there are Earth observation data available. The hope of the European Union, the intention, the objective of the European Union is to make sure that there is a market uptake, that other smaller companies or bigger companies, doesn't really matter, pick up the data, pick up the everything that comes from Spain, space. I come from space, from Spain, but not from space. Everything that comes from space, and make business with it, generate further growth, generate employment, which is what is needed in Europe, and at the same time generate well-being, because those applications, the downstream development, are also good for us. So we generate growth, which is good, but we also generate specific applications that make our life easier in many respects, more efficient, professionally speaking. And then we also, so we have the manufacturing industry, we have the downstream industry, and we also have the public sector. The public sector is profiting from the investment we're making in space to develop also services that ultimately benefit citizens as well, benefit the economy in general, and the citizens. They help them, they help politicians, decision makers, make better decisions. Climate change is the case in point. Without Earth observation, it is not possible to make well-informed policy decisions when it comes to mitigation policies regarding climate change. So those are the opportunities that we have today in space. And it has to be said also that we have the opportunity to sort of fit into a virtuous cycle, because the more we invest, the more activity is created around space, the more we need space, and the more potential there is for further space activity. And that also applies to space exploration, which I suppose that at some point we'll talk about today. But I will leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll turn to Camilo Guzman in Bogota. Camilo, you represent, in the sense of living and working in Colombia, and I visited with Camilo some years ago, and not too many years actually, but too long at this point. I would like to go back. And I found tremendous enthusiasm for space activities there among the students, many of whom are Camilo's students. And I saw that, but I also saw that they are very much new in the space world, and so they represent a different view than both Felipe and Augusto, who actually represent a pretty advanced countries in terms of space activities. So, Camilo, perhaps you could respond and talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that you see from your vantage point there in Colombia.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, in Latin America in general, and in Colombia, we have less money, public money for space activities. So the opportunity I see in space now is as you say, the change of the model of financing of space activities. We see now, for instance, Satellogic in Argentina, Uruguay. They are creating with private capital, private ventures, a big company for Earth observation. And as Gusto said, I think in Latin America, we have a great opportunity creating companies for the use of data. We don't have a lot of money to create a big space programs, a lot of satellites, but maybe the young students we have now in our universities are thinking more in applications for mobiles, devices, or something like that, that can make able to use the space for the needs we have in Colombia and in Latin America in general. We have a lot of opportunities in the development of those applications, those use of those data. And I think for us, for instance, in Colombia, we are trying to make a space policy since 10 years, and we still don't have this space policy. So, but I see a lot of young people, entrepreneurs, doing a lot. Also, we have a lot of maybe big companies from Europe, for instance, Eutelsat, which is trying to make a public-private partnership with Colombia to try to help to do some transfer of knowledge and technology. But I think the biggest opportunity here in Latin America is to use those private capital and ventures to make applications using the data already exists in Europe and in the big countries and in the big space programs to adapt this data to our needs, because the needs we have are really different of the need, for instance, in Europe or the United States, Japan, etc.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting perspective. Do you think that Colombia, for example, could be a leader within Latin America, or how does the country of Colombia relate to other countries within Latin America in space activity?
Yeah, I think for the big programs, I think it's Brazil, which has the lead because they have a lot of satellites, they have a big space agency, they have even two launching facilities. Now Mexico is doing a great job. Since 5 to 8 years, they are doing a great job in space activities. And Colombia, sadly, the public sector is, but sadly, it's not sadly. Fortunately, we are in a peace process, so we are more focused in the peace process now than in another process like infrastructure, space, or something like that. In this moment, for Colombia, space, for the government, the space is really not important. But for the private sector, I think they see there is a lot of opportunities here to take, and we have a big investment from private sector in the creation of applications for device mobiles and for Earth observation and some kind of that thing. So I think maybe Brazil is more concentrated in big space programs, more like in Europe or Korea, something like that. And Colombia, Mexico will move more for application, use of data, and those kind of opportunities.
Thank you very much. It's interesting. One of the things that we're seeing here in this year's SSP is a heavier than usual emphasis on entrepreneurial activities. And I wonder, with let me ask the either Philippe or Augusto or one after the other here your views about the rise of entrepreneurial activities in Europe, for example. Well, let's start with Philippe. And then
So we are aware of this big change and this the power, the initiative, the ambition of the private sector in Europe in space. And our role is not to compete as a space agency, governmental space agency, is not to compete with this investment, this activity, this ambition, but it's to help it. And we do with our own tools. The first tool is the law. I have explained today how we change our law in order to authorize and to facilitate the access to the market from new competitors, not only the one created by ESA Ariane, but for the opening of Guyana Space Center to Soyuz, we had to adapt our legislation. And we also, this legislation is not only to add constraints, it is the opposite. We, even with the technical regulation, it is indirectly a way to give guarantees, to provide guarantees to banks, to insurance, that there is a neutral authority that controls the systems. Because with the new space, there is also a problem of credibility. If it's developed without any control and without, because new space, as you know, it's not, it's private entrepreneurs, but it is entrepreneurs not from the space sector. They are coming from the Silicon Valley, from the new economy, what we call. But so the law also helps to control, to regulate, and to give confidence to investors on such new systems. So I would say on the legal aspects, and as a space agency, we are changing. For example, for Ariane 5, CNES with ESA, we were putting the requirements. Ariane 5 has been designed by CNES. So we were writing the requirements, and industry was manufacturing. No, the design was not on the side of the industry. With Ariane 5, we have changed. 6, sorry. We have changed the design authority in the new governance with ESA has been transferred to a new company. Now its name is now Ariane. It has been Airbus Safran Launches. So a subsidiary between Safran, which was the engine manufacturer, and Airbus Defence and Space, which was the rocket assembly. And now it's clear, and it was not easy because in our culture we liked at CNES, it's the same in NASA everywhere. We like to control everything, and so we just give now what we call guidelines to the industry, and the new model, the Ariane group, which has been created, is going to take all the risks in case of failure, for example, and all the risk also is of business. You have heard about this EGAS program, this LEAP. It was, I would say, subsidized from states to help Ariane Space to 10 years ago to stay in the market. And now this is going to be finished. The full responsibility, the full economic responsibility is transferred to the private sector, and so it's difficult to live for the engineers at CNES, but as a compensation, we are working for the future. We have created an innovation directorate, and we are thinking about next steps. And so our engineers are now not concentrated to make second Ariane 5 recurrent systems, but to invent new systems such as reusable. We are working on reusable rockets, refueling. We are working on this technology, refueling, maintenance in orbit. We support. We have been approached by Airbus with a new vessel which names Space Tug. Perhaps you have heard about. So it will be a space vessel able to move the satellites in the right orbit, or to put in the graveyard orbit, or to maintain it, to repair, or to change components, or to help it to return on the Earth on a controlled manner. So we are not any longer specifying, giving orders. We help through adequate legislation or through new partnerships models. We have to, and that we are inventing. This is on process. It's
So Augusto, is there some program within the EU in the space world at this point to assist with entrepreneurial activities?
In fact, I don't know if, some of you might be aware that in October 2016, the European Commission issued a policy document under the title A Space Strategy for Europe, which is an important piece because it does give a little bit the priorities for what the European Commission proposes that the European Union does, because the member states in the European Union proposes that the European does in space. And I would say the central message, one of them, I think that it's probably the one that carries the greatest weight, in my opinion, is that the Commission wants to do its utmost to make sure that we capitalize on the investment made on these programs by helping companies to develop applications that derive from space. Using data, like Camilo was saying, for Europe, for the European Union, this is a priority. Clearly we want to help the space industry as such, and we do so by investing so much money in putting satellites in space and so forth and launching, because the European Union has become the first institutional launcher customer in Europe. There is no other institutional buyer of launchers today. We have almost 30 satellites to launch in the next 10, 15 years or so to complete our Copernicus and Galileo constellations, using hopefully Ariane 5 for sure, which we have helped to modify so they can launch 4 Galileo satellites in one go, but also Ariane 6 when it becomes available. So we're helping the space industry, but the big business is downstream. The big business is to be made by geospatial companies, 10, 15 people, 8 people companies. We want to encourage startups. We have a whole array of instruments to support startups. There is, in general, I have to say, there is a whole a range of measures that are being developed to help startups in general, okay, across the board. But specifically in the space strategy, we talk about space startups, and there are different instruments. The difficulty sometimes is that there are so many that it's difficult to weed out and find the right one for you. So we are aware of this, and we know that we have to make an effort to make things clearer, and colleagues are working quite hard at this so that people are aware of the possibilities that there exist. And similarly, like France has done in improving regulation that facilitates setting up companies, particularly in the space domain, the Union is doing the same. Again, not specifically for space, but clearly that will help also companies that want to do something even upstream or downstream in space. So we we attach a great deal of importance to entrepreneurship and to making it happen, basically, to really provide a boost to the emergence of a commercial space economy.
Thank you. And now you've all heard it. You submit your applications to these two gentlemen here on the stage because they're there to help and bring your ideas to fruition. So take advantage of it. After you leave here with all your enthusiasm and so forth, if you're not too tired at that point, please take advantage of this opportunity. I'm kidding, of course, but I think the message, the overall message is that things are changing in Europe, and I think I heard from Camilo that they're also changing in quite a bit in Colombia and probably other parts of Latin America. So at this point, I think rather than hear from us more, I think it might be very helpful to have some questions from the audience. I know some of you have some questions. And I think, yes, I see the question, the questioner there, but I really can't see very well. So we have two people, Tara and Camilo, on the floor here to provide microphones. So I'll depend on Tara and Camilo to pick people out and so forth.
Hello. Do you think that there are some genuine political rationales for deep space exploration in today's world?
Good question. Anybody care to take a crack at that? Political rationale for deep space exploration.
The rationale is the same than for science. The human beings needs to go beyond its limits, and for your future you must consider this challenge for humanity. So it's long run political prospect, but it is the same logic than for advanced research. Yeah.
I'm not going to give an institutional answer. I'm going to give you a personal opinion, which pretty much coincides with what Philippe has just said. I think that it's almost inevitable. Ask yourself, where is this world power that is going to sit and do nothing about space exploration? When I look at China, Russia, the US, I don't see them relaxing about space exploration. What are the motivations? Well, we can give you, a long list of reasons, but clearly there is something there that is fueling space exploration. There is a political concern, has to do with your profile in the global scene, has to do with your clientele, maybe the way they perceive you as a technological power, superpower. It has to do with political influence, geopolitical influence, and so forth. So I don't see any danger in the future of space exploration. This has to be coupled with economic considerations, clearly, because you don't do explorations without money. So there is an element of that. There is also an element, a technological element to it, but technology, okay, is there to follow. It goes behind the political will. I think that perhaps we are still in a phase where things are moving. Mars, lunar settlement, probably both. What I'm personally quite confident is that this sort of human aspiration to discover is not going to is not in danger. It's not going to end anytime soon, precisely because there is this geopolitical fuel that is driving it to a large extent.
I might add to that I've always been impressed by the enormous pride that individuals and larger entities within different countries have in the achievements of their citizens in space of various kinds. For instance, when I had the opportunity to visit the Universidad Sergio Arboleda in Bogota, one of Camilo's one of his compadres in there at the university was very proud of what his students had accomplished in launching a small microsat. But that goes further even in China, for example, when China launched successfully to the moon the Chang'e rover, and I just tremendous feeling of accomplishment among the people that I met outside the space establishment. So the ordinary public and so forth who could see this accomplishment and felt very proud of it. And that comes back to the government, if you will, because good feelings are to be desired by the governments from their citizens. So I think it's political in a certain way, but it's also national pride that is not quite just political in terms of the wider world dynamic, but also the self-pride in your own country's accomplishments, which is very important, and that continues to be a driver. So, other questions?
Here.
Hello. So during the program, we recognize three big motivation to do space things. Prestige of the country that you just spoke of, economy, and people enthusiastic about space, that they inspired by astronauts and love the Hubble picture and really proud of their first satellite. So what do you think is the biggest motivation today of country to invest in space?
Thank you for the question. That's a good question. Let me start with Camilo to see if he has an answer for that would be interesting.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest motivations is the well-being, as Augusto said. I think the space application and technology can help countries to reduce, for instance, the poverty, the impact of the climate change. So I think the motivation today is to improve the lives and the style of life of people. But also for the private sector, I think there are a lot of opportunities to make money, a lot of money, if you do things well. So for government, I think it's the people, of course, is the reason of the government to improve the life of the citizens. But also for the private sector, I think there is a lot of money, and also the creation of employment, good employment, well-paid opportunities for engineers and other scientific who works in space. and space activities.
Thank you, Camilo. Comments from either you two? Augusto?
I mentioned earlier on that for the grouping of nations that the European Union is, the societal and economic motivation is the real driver for investing in space. Clearly there is a scientific side to it, which is not neglected and we don't ignore, but it's not the primary drive. The primary drive is using space to power the economy, part of the economy. It's a contribution towards the economic development, to respond to societal challenges, very important, and think in terms of Earth observation. It's not just climate change. We also have emergency issues. We have migration issues. We have everything that has to do with land management, water management, marine or inland water, and so forth. All those are extremely important things for our societies and for our economies. The same can be said about satellite navigation. There is also another factor, because we could say, well, you can go and buy that somewhere. You could go to the US or to Russia and get all that from them. We already have GPS, we already have GLONASS. Why do we need another satellite constellation? So there is another sort of more geopolitical element to it that has to do with autonomy, with the fact that if that is so, if space is so important to us, are we going to deprive ourselves of that critical instrument? The answer is obviously, well, not necessarily. We're going to make an effort and invest in these instruments because they are essential for our life, for our well-being, for our economy. So that's a very important driver as well for us to invest in space. The same can be said, of course, about, for example, access to space. Access to space is also one of the priorities, space policy priorities for the European Union. Why? Not because there is shortage of launches, there are plenty of launches around. Actually, there are far too many for the amount of launches that there are every year. But we need to make sure that we do have the possibility of launching whenever we need to, and that we don't necessarily come second to somebody else's priorities, or that somebody else's priorities work against us, which can be sometimes the case too. So we don't want to find ourselves in that situation. So that's also a very important driver.
Camilo, there's a wonderful opportunity for you to make that argument to your government in Colombia, that they don't want to be left behind, they want to have autonomous ability. See how that works.
I will tell you.
Philippe, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, there is many factors that push politicians to invest in space, government in space, to invest in space. So you mentioned to satisfy the citizen needs in terms of meteorology, public services, and anything. You have also this concept of I would say space dominance for big powers, big countries. You know, with space, you hold all the information tools. You can observe, you can navigate, localization, you have localization, you can hear everything in the world. And if you combine that, you domain the world. So you have a leadership, and this theory has been developed in the US many think tanks, and according to the UK domined the world in the 19th century by having the control of the sea, and the one who will control the world in the 21st century will be the one who has independence of access to space and independent control on space assets. So that's why any power, any state, any government needs to have its independence access to space and also independent access to space application. It's not to go to space for the space, but also for the application for the citizen. And there is also another motivation for exploration, because exploration is not a direct interest for us. But just imagine we are in the 40th, 50th century, and why we go to India or to explore America, to explore other territory? You know, the question is, there is no question. You have to do that. The question is how to do this, and is it too risky? How to pay it? But there is no question on the utility to go beyond, to go beyond the frontiers. So
Thank you. We could have some more questions from the audience. Yes?
Good evening. With regards of resource utilization, and we had a lot of discussion in the last years, and now Luxembourg made their move and put it forward, and I guess you were expecting a question in this direction. How do you see this affecting now the discussion, and will this result maybe in finally a multilateral agreement somewhere? Because I know, for example, Germany definitely has a totally different opinion there than Luxembourg. On the European side, and maybe also on the Latin American side, like how do you see it there that now in Europe the country is pushing forward for this?
You have an answer? Oh, we lost Camilo again.
We wait for Camilo.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. No, I have a partial answer. I have the answer that comes from the commission paper that I mentioned. We have a new reality there. A reality that is testing the limits of the existing legal framework. Can you go out and do whatever and mine an asteroid and you do that under what legislation? The U.S. issued legislation, which has been questioned even internally because it leaves a number of questions unanswered, a number of possible cases. I'm not an expert, but I know that it does leave a few holes in it for cases where you have companies that operate under the American flag, but not necessarily American, so on and so forth. I'm not going into the details. You do a search on the web, you easily find articles commenting on that piece of legislation. So the fact of the matter is that the Commission papers does refer to that, in that acknowledges that there might be a necessity to review the existing legal framework for this sort of activities. Now, this is again the Commission as an institution point of view. Now in Europe, there may be different approaches, and the proof is that some member states are doing things and some others are doing different things or other things. And well, we'll see where it goes. I think that perhaps the prudent approach is to, well, let's wait and see. It's not big enough for the time being for us to get sort of wired up and run like a headless chicken to try. No, it's not that urgent, but it's something that is there. It will be a very interesting space to watch, see where we go with this issue of space resources. And I was in the U.S. This is an anecdote. I was in the U.S. Last year, 2016, and spending a semester at the University of Colorado. Colorado is a space state. There's a lot of activity there, and it was soon after this announcement from Luxembourg, and I wasn't even aware of it. I had landed there, and a lot of people came to me telling me about Luxembourg and the initiative to attract industry and the scheme that they had put in place, and I had to look it up and see what's going on. So I was impressed that a small state like Luxembourg was making an impact so far away, you know, all across the Atlantic, halfway across the U.S. in Colorado, the space sector. I think that it's wonderful that this is happening, that they are managing to make waves in that way.
Yeah, you know, we really live in a really exciting time in the space sector. There's, you know, it's 50 years since the signing into force of the Outer Space Treaty, and there's a lot going on within the UN in these matters. There's a lot of discussion about what the way forward is in the space and the legal world, I think there's going to be some really significant changes taking place over the next 10 to 20 years, and all of you are going to be part of that. I think that's an extremely exciting prospect for all of you, and I look forward to seeing how that all plays out. Camilo, have you got a last word for us from Bogota on all these matters,
Yeah,
particularly in the legal side of what do you think may happen with the Outer Space Treaty and beyond?
Well, first, I think activities, space activities, and the development of technology run faster than the law and the treaties. But like Uber or like Airbnb, which are changing, for instance, the tourism in Colombia or the transportation in the cities in Colombia, we have a lot of problem with these regulations. They try to forbid Uber, they try to penalize them, they put some fines to Uber, but technology is so important now for people. And I think these activities in space like mining, if we can do it, we are going to do it. The companies are going to do those kind of technologies if they can. I think then the governments and the UN COPUOS or something like that have to adapt the legal framework to those activities. It's almost impossible to fight against the technology and the development of technology. We try in Colombia with Uber, we have a lot of problems. We have to forbid Uber and some application for transportation. And finally, people still are using Uber and those kind of technologies. So I think in space activities, more specifically, we're gonna have the same thing. If we can do mining in space, if we can have very important resources in space and we can do it technically and we can bring them to Earth, the companies are going to do it. No matter if we have a legal framework for UN or not. Yes. So I think it's more the work of the policymaker try to find the right way to motivate the private sector, but also to preserve the interest of the humankind. Because, of course, one of the biggest achievements of the UN treaties is that we talk about the humankind, the interest of the humankind. So we have to find the right regulation for these activities, futures activities, and in those kind of fora we are trying to do it. And I'm sure we are going to find a way to preserve the interest of the humankind, and it's also in the interest of the humankind to develop more activities and as Philip says, allow the exploration of space and maybe the economic side of the exploration of space.
Thank you very much. That's, unless there's further comments from Philippe or Augusto, you have other comments? So we'll need to stop pretty soon, but go ahead, please.
Just one thought regarding this Space Resources thing and Luxembourg initiative. It does sort of it's an eye-opener. You know, you're a small country, you're able to this. It means that in this new environment, you don't necessarily need to have a long tradition in space. Mind you, Luxembourg does have big SATCOM companies. SES, of course. So it's not that they are newcomers to space business. But what I mean to say is that there has been a democratization of space in a way that industry that has no record in space can become space industry. Well, SpaceX, I mean, they came from nowhere. So that's the best example. But the same can be said about countries, which is good news for Colombia, perhaps.
Yes.
But, you know, in the sense that the situation is so fluid that it does present interesting opportunities, regardless of whether you had or had not already sort of experience and activity in this domain. It's just a matter of being creative and just going for it, I guess.
Thank you very much. And Philippe, have you got last word?
Yeah, about the Luxembourg, the US initiative on the resource, I think it's a first step to try to check the existing legal system, because the legal system created by United Nations is frozen for about 30 years. It is impossible, you have been at the COPUOS, it is impossible to change a line, a comma in the existing treaty. So I think I understand the initiative in US and in Luxembourg is to push to do something, to meet in a table and to try to find a solution, because I believe that the US government or the Luxembourg, they will try to find not a treaty but an international solution, an international consensus, because for business you need legal security, and if you want to attract investors on a new business, you need to have at least a secured legal regime. And in Luxembourg, by now, it is essentially a law on company. It's a financial law. It's to protect investment. But Luxembourg, yet up to now, has no space legislation, no authorization process. Even ECS belongs to the government, the big company. So, and there is no technical regulation. And the question of registration of satellites in Luxembourg is rise also. So there's many issues to tackle, and there is also within Europe the question of the unfair competition, because if you allow one country to attract and without any regulation, technical for security and to protect environment, it can be also a form of unfair competition. So so the interest of this initiative is to force people to discuss, and people at the international level, of course.
Thank you very much. That's so you all heard it now. If this is a new way for you all to get involved in space by becoming space lawyers and getting involved in thinking through these various sticky problems in the legal realm of space activities. I want to thank Philippe, Augusto, and Camilo for taking part in this, and thanking you all for your good questions and for sticking it out and staying with us for this discussion. So thank you very much, and with that, we'll close. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank you. And on behalf of the International Space University, I'd like to present you with this little gift here. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you.